Who's the monkey that plays in school? It's Andy, it's Andy. Who's the monkey that thinks Mendel rules? It's Andy, it's Andy. Mendel rules, everybody. Da 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 do 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 do. Da 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 do do. All right. Da 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 do do do. Hey now. Da 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 do do. Mr. Kovacs class. It's Mr. Kovacs class. You might learn a ton. It's Mr. Kovacs class.
It's interesting too.
It's Mr. Kovacs class.
Andy's super cool.
It's Mr. Kovacs class. Wait. Is Andy really Little Red? I don't know. All right, fans, friends. Last week on Friday, you saw the incredible Tony Award-winning play written, produced, directed, and starring me, about the life of Gregor Mendel. And if you recall in the play, Mendel was a young farm boy who went off to become a monk, who got his opportunity to be something, a teacher in Vienna, blew it, went back to the monastery, wound up spending his whole life as a farmer, played around with peas, died. And then 20 some odd years after his death, he became famous, just like he always wanted. Let's look into things a little bit more carefully and closely today about what Mendel actually did. I mean, the play was awesome, but it missed a lot of little key details that I think are important. One thing that I think is really cool is that Gregor Mendel explained how parents pass their genes onto their offspring. Charles Darwin did not know how that happened. He had some ideas. Mendel lived at the same time as Charles Darwin. Mendel had even bought Darwin's books and had read pretty much all of Darwin's books. I would say Mendel was probably a big fan, but the two never met. I mean, Darwin was in England. Mendel was in Austria, in Central Europe, not Australia, Austria. No kangaroos. Okay, so they never met, and of course, really, Mendel was a nobody. But it is interesting to me that he would have read it, and you'd think that if they'd ever got together, they could have shared a lot of really important information. And then by the time Hugo de Vries found Mendel's work, Darwin was already dead, but all it did was it supported what Darwin's ideas were. And by the way, I'm wearing these glasses because Mendel was famous for wearing his glasses. These don't work that well. All right, so in the play, Mendel Rules, which was pretty good. If you want to watch it, it's available on my, if you want to watch it again and share it with your friends and families, it's available on my YouTube channel. Right, but let's talk about Mendel and some things that he really did, okay? So first of all, this is Mendel, right? He was an Augustinian monk for most of his life. He grew up as a farm boy. Remember, he was in Austria, right? And he was actually from the part of Austria that's right near what is now the Czech Republic. We call that Bohemia. So he was Bohemian, just like the Queen song. Mamma mia, mamma mia. But he most likely spoke German. Maybe he spoke Czech. He probably also knew a little Latin. All right, actually probably knew a lot of Latin. Now, Gregor Mendel, of course, got his chance to he was such a good monk. He got his chance to go to the capital of Vienna, which is called, or the capital of Austria, which is called Vienna, which at the time was like the center of art and culture in the world. Okay, so Vienna is famous for the opera. It's famous for famous composers you may have heard of, like, Mozart. It's famous for art and culture, and at the time, it was ruled by the Habsburgs, and they were in control of all of this land. It was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So there's Austria and then Hungary, and those two kingdoms controlled a lot of what we call Eastern and Central Europe, all the way into Asia. So it was a big deal. Of course, when he got there, he wasn't that good a student, and he did not pass. He didn't pass his exams, so he had to go back to the monastery. And when he got back to the monastery, he was put in charge of the gardens. And if you paid attention to the play, There's some kind of irony there because he did not like working in the gardens. He did not like being a farmer as a kid. And when you're working in the gardens of the monastery, your job is to grow food, which is basically being a, yes, you got it, a farmer. Now, I grew all the typical food crops, right? Like beans and carrots and cabbage and potatoes, even you name it. I mean, things you would think about it. And then, of course, they grew peas for food. But one of the things about peas, I think Mendel kind of got lucky with this, was that pea flowers, I mean, they're beautiful. They can come in different colors, white and purple primarily. Pea flowers often have their petals covering up their reproductive parts. So pea flowers, more often than not, fertilize themselves. No insects get in. Why was this important? Because Mendel saw an opportunity. He saw an opportunity that he could control which peas were the parents of which peas, right? So what he would do was open up the pea flowers and he would like cut out the male parts, right? And if he did that, that flower could not fertilize itself. Does that make sense? That flower could not fertilize itself. And then he would go to another flower and pick up some pollen, the sperm cells, and transfer them. So he purposely decided who would be the parents. And since the flowers were closed, no insects were getting in and messing it all up. So he knew who the parents were and then what their children looked like. And he did this for years, like 20 years, where he would do this and he counted. I think he was just bored, or he was probably interested in the outcome, but he obviously was, and he took detailed records of year after year, generation after generation of pea plants, what the parents looked like, what the children looked like. And he did that for a whole bunch of different traits, including flowers. Like in the play, I just concentrated on flowers, but whole different kinds of traits. And for every trait, he found similar numbers. He found similar ratios. He figured out that, first of all, I figured out that if you could let the plants go, right, and just let them self-pollinate, he called them purebred. And then if you crossed them, if you purposely had them breed, he called them hybridized, only one of the traits showed up. That confused him, but now we know that that's a dominant trait. And then if you let these plants self-pollinate, in the next generation, the dominant trait showed up 3 times to every 1 time that the recessive trait showed up. All the time, for every trait. So this led him to believe that both parents passed on the trait, but one just covered up the other, and it gets uncovered in the next generation. And then if you do that again in the next generation, there are basically 4 different parents, and you get that same ratio in 2 of them. And since Mendel's time, a man named Reginald Punnett came up with the idea of a Punnett square, but this is a good way to predict, and we're going to learn how to use this to predict offspring. But the Punnett square is just a way to figure out what are the possible combinations. What are the possible combinations that 2 parents, you always line up the parents on the side, what will the babies might look like? And every time they have a baby, these are the chances. Like in this case right here, there's a 1 out of 4 chance that the babies will have wrinkled peas, a 3 out of 4 chance that they will be nice, plump, round peas. So every time they have a baby, that's the chance. If they had 100 babies, you would expect that 25 of them would be wrinkly. It is possible that 100 of them would be wrinkly, but less likely. Right? It's all about probability. So that's what Mendel did. He just wrote it all down. He calculated it. And when he sent that back to the university, they just kind of filed it away because he wasn't really known as anything. And then he died. And then 10 years after he died, Hugo de Vries found that work and he supported everything that he did. So Mendel became famous 28 years plus after he died. I don't know if that's what Mendel wanted, but that's what he got. So that's the true story of Gregor Mendel. Today, in your part 2, you're going to be revisiting Mendel's experiments. And your part 3, of course, we're going to review Mendel's ideas with traits, with possibly the cutest video I have ever seen on the internet. All right, enjoy the day, people.